Well, Newzroom Afrika's very own senior politics reporter, Ziyanda, is in Washington, D.C. ahead of the president's visit, and she joins us live this evening. Ziyanda, a good evening to you on our side. Of course, I imagine it's afternoon there for you. And really great to see that you are there to see the arrival of the president, a much anticipated meeting that's taking place here on Wednesday. Talk to us about, I know that at this point we're still seeing officials really talking between the two countries on what that program of interaction is going to look like, but the kind of information that you're gathering then in that plan being put together.
Absolutely, Naledi, and a very good evening to you back at home. It is the afternoon here in Washington, D.C. And as you've mentioned, South African officials have been engaged in meetings. They still are in meetings to hash out what the program will look like. The president is arriving tomorrow, and his officials and ministers, the team that will be flanking him, is already making its way here. It's an important meeting, lots of discussions. You've just played that insert from Malungelo Boy about the unresolved land question and how this has been weaponized by the Trump administration. Lots of conversation about whether or not, the president should even hold his breath or be wasting his breath, I should say, trying to explain things that Trump already knows but is deliberately trying to misconstrue when it comes to our transformation law. So it seems that, there's something else that Donald Trump wants from South Africa. Seemingly, it's not about the ICJ case. Seemingly, we had Ibrahim Rasool, unceremoniously expelled from the U.S. Earlier on this year. It's also seemingly got nothing to do with the fact that, South Africa has been upholding its own constitutional architecture, and this has been explained over and over again, even its association with BRICS. So there's also lots of talk about trade actually being a part of what underpins the conversations that take place over the next couple of days, and how much of South Africa's sovereignty then will, be at stake when these discussions get underway. How much is President Cyril Ramaphosa willing to concede, and how much of Cyril Ramaphosa, the man, is going to be important for this face-to-face for the first time with Donald Trump since his return as the 47th president of the United States.
Yeah, I think a lot of the strength from public perception might be who is flanking the president in this all-important meeting. And let's talk about that. There's the various sort of, I suppose, tones that they bring to the discussion, the ministers, of course, accompanying President Ramaphosa.
So you'll have the Minister of Agriculture, John Steenhuisen, who is, of course, the leader of the Democratic Alliance. And he himself has come under fire from his own constituency about saying the fact that there is no land confiscation in South Africa. There is no white genocide. And so he's going to be critical when it comes to explaining what the Expropriation Act is intending to do, how much land is actually in the control of the government, in the hands of black people, in the hands of white farmers. And there's going to be a lot of nuance that's needed when talking about the issue of land. As you'll know, in our country is quite complex. Yes, indeed, it's also separated along racial lines, where you have farm owners predominantly being white and farm workers predominantly being black, and that the violence, yes, is by and large perpetrated against white farmers, but that does not mean that there's a white genocide underway. And at the same time, the pace at which our land, restitution has taken place has been very slow. But in the same breath as well, Naledi, there are laws that have now had to be put in place to deal with this unresolved land question. So there's a lot of nuance that goes with that issue. Then you're going to have a Park Stawu there, who is the Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, playing an important role there, especially when you think about discussions around companies, satellite companies like Starlink, which we expect to form part of the discussions between Trump and our very own Cyril Ramaphosa, because of the influence of Elon Musk on the Trump administration. And the other layer as well that we must also look at is the domestic politics here in the US and the so-called influence that Musk has over Trump, there's lots of speculation that that relationship is no longer the same, and that, there are some who are questioning Musk's role with the Deutsch, when you look at the equity laws, and also even when you look at how here in the United States, both within Congress and by local journalists, lots of questions about the reception of those 49 white Afrikaners, how much of that has been underpinned by the race of those who have been now granted refugee status vis-a-vis those who have been applying for refugee status in the United States but have been denied such an opportunity. What does the Trump administration define as genocide? Because words do have meaning. And so even here, Donald Trump faces pressure not only about the 49 white Afrikaners, but the state of his economy and how that may also have a material impact into how he goes into these discussions. Just look at the trip that he undertook in the Mideast just last week, where he came back with trillions of dollars in oil deals. And so this is why then there's a lot of speculation and talk that a lot of what is going to be discussed between the two presidents is going to be around trade. And what exactly does Donald Trump want from South Africa? It's clear that there's something else that he wants, because despite the at least 2 or 3 phone calls that Ramaphosa and Trump have actually exchanged, that has not been enough to change Trump's mind when it comes to this falsehood that there's land confiscation and a white genocide being undertaken in South Africa.
Yeah, one of the things that Donald Trump certainly is known for is his ability to really make good use of what the optics, put out. I immediately think of the images of the 49 South Africans arriving in the US, and then hard to, of course, not think about that meeting with Ukraine President Zelensky. So just as a journalist who's now touched down in Washington, one would imagine that we would have quite a bit of access then to be able to see, because the optics are so incredibly important, Ziyanda.
Absolutely. And this is why then there's a lot of discussion about what Cyril Ramaphosa, the man, will bring to this conversation, and that, invoking the spirit of Nelson Mandela just simply won't be enough. The Oval Office has become Donald Trump's political theater. And so in that vein, what scenario plotting and planning has the presidency put in place when it comes to how they approach this meeting? But also, there's another school of thought that says it doesn't matter how much our president prepares for this meeting, because an unpredictable character like Donald Trump is someone that you can't necessarily plan for. What would assist is understanding what he actually wants and what would ameliorate this tension between Pretoria and Washington. And that is something that the officials that the president goes with, or arrives with here in Washington with, I should say, is going to be very key. Is this delegation senior enough? Does it have enough gravitas to actually shift the needle when it comes to this relationship? Or are we going to see another talk shop? And also not forgetting the issue of AGOA being put on the table. That's also being debated in the House of Congress, and it coming under review. But also the fact that there's a lot of talk about how the Make America Great Again faction within the Republican Party is losing a lot of influence, and how that also has informed how Donald Trump, even though he may have this bravado and have this facade of being in control, just look at how, he's had to walk back on the issue of tariffs as an example of how, this is by and large about business and it's about trade. Even the same can be said about what's taken place with his visits in the Gulf states last week. In his first administration, the countries that he actually visited last week were countries that he spoke disparagingly of. So when it comes to foreign policy as well, he's walked back on his own foreign policy objectives. So is there even principle at play here, or is this about also salvaging the U.S. economy, which is also currently in danger? Moody's just a few days ago actually downgraded, the country's credit rating. And so when there are lots of factors domestically that are also influencing how Trump is approaching his foreign policy, and when it comes to South Africa, there are those who are saying, well, we have been on the lips of Donald Trump, and how then can South Africa, through President Cyril Ramaphosa, leverage on that? Because both these countries need each other. If you just look at AGOA, if you look at our oceans economy and how vessels move through both the Atlantic and Indian Ocean, we are very critical, because if you look at the north, there are issues with a passage there, the Suez Canal crisis as well recorded. So that could just be the key to actually unlocking and resetting the South Africa-US relations.
Yeah, well, it's going to be a busy few days for you, Ziyanda. Thank you so much for checking in with us. And of course, you're watching very closely the arrival of President Cyril Ramaphosa. Just for the sake of our viewers, we've got that appointment viewing. When we're expecting that to be?
6 a.m. tomorrow on the AM Report. We'll be coming to you live. It'll be midnight our time, but surely by then we'll have an indication of when our president touches down here in the U.S., what his program looks like. That's going to be very critical, not just for him, but the program of the officials that are going to be with him, because a lot of the issues are likely to be ironed out behind closed doors with those various ministers that are going to be accompanying Ramaphosa.
All right. Ziyanda Ngcobo there, our reporter, speaking to us live from Washington, D.C., having arrived in Washington. This is ahead of the president's arrival in Washington, where he'll be meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump on Wednesday to discuss tariffs, trade, certainly, and I say this with inverted commas, white genocide in South Africa. So do stay tuned with us throughout the week on Channel 405. Let's take a short break. More news when we return.